Hi, everybody. Welcome. Just wanted to let you know if you want to grab a cup of coffee. We have so much food, so please, if you have, just want to get up during the talk or now and grab something to eat, a cup of coffee, we encourage you to do so or take it with you. And I want to welcome all of you and thank you for coming. And thank you to Boston Design Week for setting up such a great week of panels and discussions. I'm Jamie Grossman. I am a realtor with Benoit Meisner Simon Real Estate. We have offices here and in Weston and Sudbury and Needham. I have lived in Newton. I've lived in Weston. I live in Newton now. And I was asked by Sean to moderate this panel because every time I've moved, I've worked with design build to renovate homes as my family upsize, downsize, and all the rest of it. And it's a process worth talking about. And through my different home renovations, I realized that the relationship you have with your contractor really has to be seamless. And by working with design build, whether it's the construction of your home or with the exterior landscaping, it's really, really wonderful to have one-stop shopping, so that you're not working with separate architects and separate designers and separate opinions, and you can just have one point person to talk to about it. When I first met Sean, my kids were grown, and I was downsizing from Weston to Newton, and I walked into a home that was built in 1927. It had been vacant for a year. It was a mess, and I loved it. I loved everything about it. I loved when I walked in, it was closed in, there were old radiators everywhere, everything was just kind of a wreck. But it was up on a hill, and it was sunny, and it felt right to me. Sean was there with another family who had little kids, and my yard drops off cliff. Not a great spot for a family with little kids. So that family left and did a project with Sean somewhere else. But Sean and I struck up a conversation and then a partnership and now a friendship about what we would do to make this house really sing. And he had the vision, I think, the same day that I did. And I'll say when I come home, that house looks now exactly like I saw it on that first day. So part of what I do when I work with clients is if you're selling a home, you want to help buyers be able to look at your home as if it's their own. You want to be able to have fresh eyes, which a real estate agent can help you do. You want to have fresh eyes on your house. So, which is hard to do if you're selling your house. You might want to take out some bulky furniture. You might want to put your pictures of your family away. You might want to freshen things up. And you need somebody with a little bit of vision to come in and help you do that. Maybe there are some little projects that would make your home much more valuable if you would do them. And if you're buying a home, whether you're starting your family or you're doing something different, you want to be able to walk into a property and not feel, well, there's too much to do. I'm too afraid, and it's too overwhelming, and I don't know what to do. And if you work with a design build team, then it's not so scary. And I will say that projects end. It's not forever. You meet someone, you talk about your vision, even though it sounds like a lot. I have a harder time, actually, which Colin will talk about, with the outside. That seems overwhelming to me. I don't know the names of the plants. I'm not sure what to do. But if you talk with somebody who has the design and the installation capability, you really can make it a very easy process. So I was asked to moderate this panel because I'm in and out of people's homes all the time, and I'm helping them talk about what to do next, whatever they're doing. And we're going to talk to a few lovely people here. So let me just introduce you to our panelists. We have Colin Han. Colin joined A Blade of Grass in 2006, and he began by installing and maintaining landscapes while he was working on his Master's of Landscape Architecture at UMass Amherst. Now he's in his 13th year, and he is head of the design department at Blade of Grass, where he enjoys guiding clients through the landscape design build process, from first pencil stroke on trace paper to the placement of the last roll of sod. Sounds overwhelming to me, that's why you need Colin to do it. And in his free time, Colin enjoys running road races slowly, working on his property in Lincoln, and is a breeder of boxer dogs with his wife. So welcome, Colin. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Sean Cutting is the president of Cutting Edge Homes, Architects and Builders. He is a second-generation design and build firm who specializes in architecturally significant renovations. Sean's firm prides itself on guiding clients from design and permitting to punch lists, providing single-source accountability, Cutting Edge Homes is a proud gold sponsor of Boston Design Week, and I want to say 2 years later, still on speed dial. Any question, Sean's always available. And welcome Jackie. Jackie Hempel and her husband moved to Boston 11 years ago from California so she could attend grad school. She got stuck here in the cold weather, but now a local Wellesley stay-at-home mom of 3, including an infant. She is a blogger and part-time designer by night. Jackie became enamored by design and renovation after purchasing a historic fixer-upper several years ago, built in 1879. And influenced by California and a love of history, the coastal casual style has made its way into her family-friendly design style and heart for renovation. And you'll see on the pretty handouts, the one with the beam, you get Jackie's house, and the one with the front entrance, you get my house. So you can see, and I don't know, cutting away the grouse and take a picture of my garden there. So, but you can see some of the work that Sean's done. So we would like to make this, so we would like to make this a very interactive process. We want you to feel free to ask questions. We're going to start off. I'd like to ask each of our panelists to just say what are some of the key benefits to design build, and maybe Sean, you want to lead us off.
Good morning, everyone. I've recognized some familiar faces here, and we appreciate everyone coming out and taking the time. And thank you, Jamie, for the illustrious introduction. I think as for us, I think there are projects that make a lot of sense for design build, and I think there are other projects that don't. You know, what we are kind of often telling clients is, you know, if you're looking for a 10,000 square foot house and you have a $10 million budget, design build may not be the best fit for that. But, you know, if you're looking to, you know, take a 1,800 to 3,500 square foot home, you're looking to renovate it, you're looking to add an addition, design build is just a process that works really well because you have a streamlined level of communication where you're not, the thing that everyone is always afraid of, right, is, you know, the change orders and what's going to happen. Well, when you have the scenario where, oh, the architect didn't put in that beam, or they didn't know that that wall was there, or whatever the case is, having the same firm do the design and do the architecture, it's a single source of accountability that they're ultimately responsible. And if you miss the beam, then that's your problem, and you have to take care of it. So it's more of a streamlined, efficient approach. And I think, you know, a lot of our clients are typically younger families where they have their own life and their own business that they need to deal with. So managing an architect and a builder and interior designer is a job in itself. And so having kind of one firm that you have kind of a single and direct source of contact with can just kind of streamline those things a little bit better.
I agree, Sean. I'll pick up on a couple of things you were saying. I think that the flexibility that comes with a design build project from start to finish is something that is really a benefit to the clients we work with, because when the project starts, everyone knows the best laid plans don't withstand a project. You know, you get on site, you find something. Your designer's there with the construction team. It's the same person you're talking with. There's also a transparency through the process. You know, when you're working with a design build company, each design comes with an order of costs so that you're never getting too far ahead of where your budget is, which is really important because that's a major steering of any project.
I think for us, when we were in the middle of when we were thinking about doing the renovation, what was appealing to us was knowing who we were going to talk to at any given moment. We knew exactly if it was an architecture question, we called the same person if it was a budget question. And so that, for us, the ease of use was just off the charts great.
So we have a project manager assigned to you. You have somebody you can communicate with at any time. One question I forgot to ask, I kind of wanted to know where people came from. Can you just show me by show of hands, who's from Wellesley? I'm going to ask a couple questions. Bunch of Wellesley. Anybody from Needham? Okay. Weston? Newton? And anybody from Boston? Oh, welcome everybody. Thank you. That's awesome. So let me ask you, what are some of the challenges of working with older homes in the area? I mean, Jackie, your picture old one.
So we walked through our house, and it was the winter of I think it was 2015, when there was 6 feet of snow outside, and we had no idea what we were looking at, but we had put multiple offers in on different houses in the area, and it was just a very hot market. And then that winter hit, and this house had come on the market right at the tail end of that winter, and I think everybody was still shoveling out of their yards, and nobody really was at this open house. And we walked through, and it smelled like cat urine when you walked in, and there was cracked plaster, and my husband took one look and just kind of scooted back towards the door. And I walked in, and I was like, look at the ceiling height, the windows are fantastic. And he said, wife, did you see the fish tile in the bathroom? Like, there was mold between every fish tile. And I could see, I had the vision, I could tell that it could really be a beautiful home. And I don't think anybody else was very interested because they were still shoveling. But when we purchased that, we knew we had a series of projects, and we knew there were going to be some smaller ones, like redoing a bathroom, and we knew there were going to be some bigger ones, like taking some walls down, maybe redoing the kitchen, hopefully adding on a garage. And so we tackled it based on what we were capable of doing at the moment. So we did the bathroom that we were all going to be using for a year or two, and then we saved up and got our understood how we wanted the space to work. And then I had a vision and a thought and contacted Cutting Edge, and they came in, and we started the process of embarking on a much larger renovation of it. And old homes need lots of love, but the thing that I've come to love so much about our home is that it really does have the character that you just don't get in some of the newer homes. And some of the newer homes, it's harder to add that character too. So was really thankful that we went the old house route. But it does have you do have to worry about structural components, and that was where we said, okay, Sean, this is everything that we like about our house. You tell us if it's actually possible. Well, if we take that wall out, will the whole thing fall down? Let us know.
I think just off of that is the old home, you can't get the saying they don't build them like they used to is really true. And so a lot of our projects are architecturally significant older homes that have the bones but don't have, need an updated floor plan. People live very differently in 1880 than they do today, and they live differently in 1980 than they do today. And so, I think that one of the things when looking and embarking on a renovation, if you live in an older home, I think it's very important to be, when you're in the interview process to hire a builder, to make sure that they have experience working in old homes. It's very, very different working in a 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s home than it is working in an 1880s, 1890s, 1900 home. And so I think it's just all experience. But there are a lot of challenges, but they're not any challenges that people that kind of primarily work on older homes can't overcome. There's I mentioned with Jackie, like anything can be done in any home. The question is how much is it going to cost, right? So being able to have a streamlined communication from the architecture and the build side to say, you know what, Jackie, that wall can come down. I don't know, that's probably in the $7,000 to $10,000 range. Oh, okay, well let's investigate that more. Versus, ooh, Jay, that wall is going to be $50,000 to come down. Well, okay, then let's not investigate that any further then. And so just being able to have kind of in real time some of those conversations is helpful.
Well, from the landscaping perspective, we love old homes because we don't have to deal with all the stuff you were just talking about. We have a jewel, that, like you said, you're not going to have that type of character in a new home. For us, the real thing is making sure it's watertight. Is the grading around the house going to keep that basement dry? Because back in the 1800s, they didn't really care if the basement got a little wet in spring. Modern house, you're going to need to protect all that infrastructure that's in there. What's really exciting about some of the older homes we've worked in is often we find, an old millstone or some feature or artifact when we're on site that we really get to work into the design. So from our perspective, we see an older house, we get excited, except if, sometimes you'll run into a situation where your home is in a historical district, which means that you have to go through an approval process. It's not a scary thing, but you're not able to open up the bag of tricks as much. You're somewhat limited to what you can do in the exterior.
Makes sense. I think it's important to realize that, Jackie walked in and had that vision. I had everyone telling me I was nuts when I walked into my house because it was a mess. And I think you have to feel it, even if you can't see past it, and know that there are resources to help you make a house what you want. That I think the point here is don't shy away from something because it looks like a mess. It's kind of like where you're standing. That people are out there to help you design-wise, design build and landscape-wise to really make the structure exactly what you want it to be.
And I think, Jamie, on that, I mean, from us, we've actually experienced where older homes are actually cheaper to renovate, from a budget perspective, more economical to renovate than newer homes, because a lot of times the newer homes have things that are really expensive to change, whether you want to raise ceiling height or the construction just isn't very good. In these old homes, the construction is just so much better. So a lot of times, even though there might be moldy tile or there might be plaster cracking, at least in that scenario, you're able to work on what we call the sexy stuff. You're able to do the kitchen and the bathrooms, but you're not having to do kind of, major reworking of the bones because of a newer house just isn't built to the same quality that the older houses are.
That's a good point, and it actually leads into the next question. So do your firms have a particular architectural style you prefer to work with, or are you flexible? Are there some great new modern homes that are going up here? Some people really want that new contemporary design, even if, or an addition might be very contemporary compared to an older home that they've purchased. Are there any limitations to what you offer?
I mean, so in our office, we have an architect who specializes in more modern. We have an architect who specializes in more traditional, and then one with somewhere in between. I think we word it, for us, the difference with our firm is when you're interviewing architects, there are some architectural firms that you're hiring because you like their style. They do traditional really well, or they do modern really well. I think for our firm and design build, it's been more about, is the client and the property the right fit? And then how do we then make the architecture work? A lot of times people are not coming to us and saying, you've done 200 traditional homes just the way that I want it. With us, and this was very true with both of you guys, is a lot of times for our clients, they have a little bit of a vision of what they're looking for too, that a lot of more seasoned architects won't be as open to some of those things. They're going to want to say, this is the way that we do it, this is the way that we found success in doing it, and are not necessarily going to be as open to saying, well, here's 5 pictures that I found on Instagram. Can we try kind of these things out? So, for us, we feel like there's a couple different styles that we can do well, and I think part of that is really a further collaboration with the homeowner as far as exactly what they're looking
Just
for.
wrote the collaboration, because I really just think that, as you were saying, it, because I think it's so important, you're kind of living together, for maybe 8 or 9 months or something like that, or maybe a little bit longer. Like sometimes you're living in the home, sometimes you're not even there yet, and you need to know that your home is being looked after. It really is a collaboration. Colin, do you want to talk about that?
Well, at A Blade of Grass, our style is kind of adaptive to what the architecture of the site is. So I would say we try and keep it clean, fresh. That can be traditional, that can be modern. But when it comes down to it, what our style is trying to move some of the interior activities outdoors. So when we go to a project, the first thing we're looking at is how can we create some outdoor spaces that interact with the indoor spaces, eating and dining space outside the kitchen. That's something that we're always going to push for, because we're in this world where we're always connected and in offices and things like that. Just being able to go outside and have dinner in a garden is a disconnect, is a relaxing thing. So that's kind of our style, is to create something that's functional, that makes you want to get out into the landscape, but also plays off those rooms in the architecture of the house. So it could be a modern house, it could be a 1780 colonial. It's going to be the finishes that match the architecture, not so much the structure.
I was really thankful during our process. The number of hand-drawn doodles that I handed Sean over the course of our renovation, he was very flexible in I had a hard time sometimes giving him exactly what I wanted it to look like and would doodle out. And I think their team was always so receptive to that I never felt like I was being annoying or pushy or bothersome, which was nice.
That is nice, yeah, that is nice.
I mean, yeah, 'cause, I mean, I think it depends on what style you've gone through. I know, Jimmy, you've also been somewhat through a more traditional style, and there's definitely times where we do want to speak up and say, no, you know what, I'm not sure that that's the right fit. But one of our biggest things now is, Jackie had so many, amazing ideas. Her kitchen probably has millions of likes on social media. And I think part of it was more, how do we take these, 7 to 10 images and kind of edit them to look like it's this cohesive space. We love this window wall from this one project, and we love this wall and so we had these things, but how do we make it your project? And I think that is one of our biggest challenges in a good way, in a creative way, of kind of how do we tie all those things together. So if you're thinking about a project, I would definitely start by looking through, Instagram and Pinterest and Houzz, and really start to kind of curate and edit, what you're looking for. And I know, some of the things that our client, you may be up till 1 or 2 a.m. tagging stuff, and then 3 months later you say, you know what, I don't really like that as much as I thought that I liked that before. So, it's just super helpful to be able to use the technology that exists today versus the old school, like going through Architectural Digest or whatever, and kind of, ripping those things out. You were so limited in some ways to the amount of, inspiration that you'd have. Now the inspiration is unlimited. So if you're thinking about a renovation of any kind, interior or exterior, I definitely would look at editing, down and creating kind of your own, design board of kind of what you're thinking.
It's true how different it is now. When I moved a few years ago, I threw out shelves and shelves and shelves of Architectural Digest that I had saved for years and years as some sort of, I don't know what, future design inspiration, but now everything's out there, and it really leads to the next question. So you're talking about, how, as someone approaching the first major renovation project, you're talking a little bit like, how do you get started? Because it's overwhelming. You want to interview a few people. You want to feel like you're hiring someone who can work within a budget, someone who understands your design aesthetic. And so one thing to get started is to start creating the design board or taking a look online and seeing kind of the ideas, things that you like. But how do you get started? What are some of the mistakes you would counsel people to avoid?
I think one of the first things when you're looking to start off a project for the first time, it's really important, and you mentioned it, this is going to be potentially a 9 to 12 month relationship. So you should start thinking about, what type of person do I want to work with? What type of personality works well with how I work? Do you want somebody who's kind of free-flowing and harder to pin down but has great ideas and goes everywhere? Or do you need somebody who's really kind of process-oriented and is going to work with you in that way? So you want to make sure that the person you're working with fits your personality first. Then it's really important to start thinking about the more process-driven things like budget and style. Because if you could hit those other things, but if you don't really like working with the person, it's going to be a failed relationship.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I think for us in kind of where to start and how you begin, I think, Colin, just feeding off of that is, it is a long-term relationship. For us, we offer a 5-year warranty, so it's even the 9 to 12 months. Jackie, her husband, and her 2 kids are like living on the other side of the house while we're doing this. So you want to make sure that your personalities mesh with this person, and there's like no hard feelings. Like there's some times where it meshes really well and it works, and there's other situations, where it doesn't work as well. So my first advice would be interviewing a couple people to know what you like. I think, it's always too, as like, word of mouth, like who do you see around in your area, who's working on your street, who's working, in your town, because I think that, those people typically may know the rules of that town a little bit better, which are pretty stringent. And then I think my other biggest piece of advice when initially starting out is deciding. Budget is always the elephant in the room. deciding whether you want to be focused more from a budget perspective or you want a team's most creative ideas. Right? So where one of our biggest challenges comes in is, a client who, we have a lot of financially driven clients, meaning like they work for hedge funds and they work in, are accountants and they, are people that are used to numbers. Well, on our first 2 or 3 meetings, it's I don't want to go as far as saying irresponsible, but it's very tough to say, I want to spend $325,000 for this project. Geez, I mean, we haven't even put pen to paper. How do we even know? So what I would recommend for clients is concentrating more on a range than a specific number. So, don't put your mindset to 325,000. Put your mindset more to 300 to 350,000, and that relieves some stress from you. And again, part of it is this whole relationship where you want to feel comfortable enough with the company that you can actually tell them your real budget. And that should be your first red flag. If you do not feel confident that you can tell this person your budget and you feel like you need to hold back in some ways, then that probably isn't the right company that you should be working with. But from a design perspective, and I know, Colin, you guys work the same way, we definitely want to know what kind of budget range you want to be in, but it's important to not necessarily be so uber focused on an exact number, which is why for a lot of our projects, the home tends to be the client's forever home, where we are definitely a firm that works within budget constraints. It's something that's very important to us. We really believe that just because something's more expensive doesn't mean that it's better. But we also like to ask clients right up front, is the budget the most important or having a really great space most important? Because if we can find value in something maybe $50,000 over your budget but adds a tremendous amount of value to the property, and how you're going to live, we want to know if you want us to bring that up or if you don't want us to bring that up.
I have to come in on that one because when we did our renovation, there were some, I met Sean that day. I saw the house for the first time, but I also have worked with other folks. I had some people come in to give me some opinions, and there were a couple builders that came in and instantly gave me a price. I mean, there was no design, there was no nothing. You saw it. It was a mess. And the price was just so high to renovate without even asking what kind of renovation maybe I was even thinking of, or really even what I had in mind. It was just a number. And it was such a turnoff to me to do that. How do you even know? I really wanted to work within a very strict budget. I didn't want to over-improve a house that maybe wouldn't warrant that. And Sean was really able to come in, and we have to duke it out a little bit, but really you have to decide. You can put out a whole list of a wish list, and then if you really want to follow and adhere to a strict budget, you have to work with a design build firm that can understand from the architecture point of view and the renovation point of view how you can do that. You have to give. You have to give up some things, which I did. Sometimes there are things that I think, well, now maybe I should have put that bar in. But you have then would have had to move plumbing in the bathroom, and you had to just, I'm sure you went through this too. You have to decide, and that's where I think the design build relationship really comes into play and makes it so much easier, especially when you're stressed and you're annoyed, and it's already maybe a little bit more, and it's taking longer, and you thought you'd get started, because that's the way a construction project goes. It's always a little bit, you know what I'm talking about. So it's a little bit longer and a little bit more hassle, but you want to have a relationship that you can kind of be frustrated in partnership with, not against who you're working with, because that just doesn't go well. Go ahead.
In our project, we really designed down even from the initial scope. That first set of blueprints we looked at, and both my husband and I said, we do not want that much square footage. Like, the whole point of this renovation isn't to make this mammoth house. It's really to honor what we have and make it more functional for a young family. So taking that then back to Sean and the architect team and saying, no, square footage isn't important to us. It's really the flow of the home. How do we get this space? So we knocked off a whole addition to the third floor, and we focused on the lower levels. And then we eventually talked about, well, do we do an attached garage now, or do we push that later? And being able to have that ongoing conversation throughout the beginning stages of the project was really helpful. And the budget range changed based off of what we decided once we saw those blueprints, what we decided was valuable for us.
helpful. Would you call
I just thought of one more thing, and this applies to everybody, not just people starting off their first big project, but one of the things you need to remember is that your contractor, your design build company is there to answer questions. If you have concerns or ideas, don't keep them inside. They help us through the process and guide us. And what happens if you have a concern and you wait too long to express it, sometimes it can cause delays, extra costs. We're happy to answer your questions. You can text, you can email. That line of communication is really important. Don't feel like, oh, I shouldn't ask this, they're gonna get annoyed. That's not the case. That's what our jobs are. And I think when you're in a new situation where it's your first project and it's probably your biggest investment you're ever gonna make emotionally or financially is your home, feel free to talk. That was the thing. Keep the lines of communication open.
That's a good piece of advice. We have a few more questions, but I'd like to open it up to all of you. If you'd like to start asking some questions for our panelists, or anybody have anything?
I have a question.
Sure.
For Jackie. I was wondering, so you mentioned that you kind of did the renovation as you kind of saved up money, which I think is very smart. But did you already start out with a full plan, or did you kind of plan as you got the money for the next stage?
So we did the parts of our house that we knew were not going to be affected by a big project. When I first walked into our house, the house is more narrow and long than it is wide. And so I knew, looking at our family room, what is our family room, there was a wall that blocked off the family room from the kitchen, and on the other side of that wall was a very steep and narrow staircase that went up to the second floor, but it was a step down part of the second floor where there was essentially a maid's quarter, I think is what it's called. There was a small room, a small bathroom. Well, I'm the family maid. I didn't want to live in that room. And I didn't want to put a kid in that room. And the staircase really scared me. The way that our family lives, our oldest son has below-the-knee prosthetics. And one misstep on this narrow and dangerous staircase I knew would just be catastrophic. And so we had it barred off, and nobody was really allowed to go up and down it, and it really inhibited the way that we lived in our home. And so knowing even from the get-go that needed to go away. So when in my head I'm working through that very first walk through of the house, I said in my head to myself, because my husband is already freaking out about the cost of the house, I'm thinking this is gonna be easy. You take this staircase out, you just magically make it go away. You move that wall, and you've got a kitchen and a family room that flow really nicely into each other and give you that more modern way that families want to live without fully opening up the house. And so I had that kind of boiling in the back of my head and knew that was way down the road, because that is you're dealing with structural changes at that point, and who knows what is being held up by that staircase. So I had that in the back of my head, but we focused initially on the places that we knew we needed to live. We were all using one small bathroom upstairs, and it was really bad. So we did that one first, and that was one project. And then we focused on the second major project that we did was our family room. We took down all of the horsehair plaster. We put up drywall, replaced windows. Every window when we moved into that house needed to be replaced. They were original windows from 1879, lead dust everywhere. When you have little kiddos, that is something that was weighing heavy on me. So really safety and initial functionality of the home weighed higher up than doing a more cosmetic update, because I wanted a pretty kitchen or a more flowing space for my family. But once we finished those projects, we kind of knew that our next one was going to be this big one. And so it was when we had saved up enough, I started the conversation, knowing that the conversation was going to take a while. And then you deal with permitting, and then you deal with town issues, and all of that takes so long. I think from our initial conversation to when we actually broke ground was almost a year.
Yeah.
So really, that once we had saved up enough, I knew, okay, well, we're going to have plenty of time to even pass that point.
I think this, your question actually brings up a great point about one of the benefits of design build is that when you're working with a design build team, during the design, if you're thinking about parsing things off into different phases, that's part of the whole design process, so that you can actually start game planning 3, 4, 5 years down the line about, what you might want to be doing in the future. And that's, I would say probably 3/4 of the projects that we work on are in a phased approach. People aren't going to bite off the full acre of landscaping. They'll focus on what's important to them first. Either it's getting the front yard looking great from the street because they want to pull in and see that beautiful front yard, or they want to focus on the family area in the back that's the private space. Or maybe the neighbor's putting up a brand new huge house. They want to screen that off. So, we've had projects that have had 5 phases, 5, 6 phases over the course of a decade. And that's another nice thing about the design build thing is that the team that's going to be doing the first phase is going to be the one that's going to be doing the next couple.
I think for us, we have every one of our clients fill out a top 10 wish list of everything that they would ever want to do to the home. And what that allows us to do is twofold. Typically, we're getting feedback on those of some things are higher priced than you thought they'd be, and some are lower. And so say, gee, so the 2-car garage, and so for us, what we want to be able to do is give us everything that you've ever thought about doing to this home. Because now that we know that, knowing that we need to potentially do this in phases, now we can design it in a way that we know where it is so that you're not having to remove or waste any money to do it in that way. There's a project that Colin and I worked on together in Lincoln where the client wanted the garage as a phase 2. And what ended up happening was, as we kind of went through the design process, we said, hold on a second here. The garage actually works down in the basement. So I know you were thinking of, a $250,000 to $350,000 garage renovation, but we can put the garage right here for $50,000. And if we hadn't asked throughout the process of what are your ultimate visions of the house, I think sometimes, again, you get kind of too much tunnel vision of I want to renovate my kitchen, or I want to bump out my family room, or I want that great master suite. Knowing everything that you would want to do typically allows us with our clients to kind of realign priorities a little bit and say, yeah, no, I know that you want to do that part of it, but it makes more sense to get the structure and the staircase and this in so that then this can be done separately.
This was my favorite part of the whole thing. Sitting down, it was like I was writing my Christmas list. It was so great, and my husband was anxiously pacing around the room because he is the numbers guy that Sean is talking about. But that was really influential in how we went about designing the space, because once I was able to even see, well, the majority of what is on my wish list is in these 2 spaces, really helped to dictate where the budget was going.
And I think as the other big tip, if you're starting to embark on a renovation project, is I actually think, depending on how your relationship with your significant other works, is do 2 lists separately and then compare notes. Right, because one of the things
With a marriage counselor.
leave me out of that one. But I think what ends up happening sometimes on that is we'll kind of traditionally meet for whatever reason with the wife, and then what will happen is we'll have a couple meetings, and then the husband will come and he'll say, well, I really wanted to do all this stuff. I say, well, why did you say that before, right? So having kind of a scenario where you're comparing notes beforehand so that then you guys are able to somewhat agree on kind of what the path is, I think is super, super helpful, because I think sometimes, right, it's so true in a marriage, in a relationship, in a construction project, but communication is really key. And when you just assume, oh, my husband also thinks that the 2-car garage is most important. He's like, no, I don't. I like shoveling, whatever it is, I mean, I think we found some really good tidbits of actually being able to have them make lists separately and then compare notes.
I think that's a great idea, and I think it's another example where design build comes in. You've already got, maybe it's just you making all the decisions, maybe there's 2 of you making decisions, then you're going to have an architect, then you're going to have a designer, then you're going to have the builder. It's just a lot of, then you're going to have the landscape designer, then you're going to have the landscape architect. It's just a lot of people, and it's as you can tell, it's a long relationship. So if you're renovating a bathroom, and that's it, okay, we'll renovate your bathroom. But if you're looking to really do some projects throughout time. It's really nice to have a relationship with a company that you can ask questions, come back to, have a long-term plan, not have to go through the whole kind of rigmarole again and again and again every time you decide to do, another project. Even for myself, I'm thinking, oh God, I should call him, because I just never really finished that basement, and I probably should do that. But we didn't. But I know who to call. I'm not going to be out there interviewing contractors again and trying to get someone else to design this. So I think that's a good.
Jimmy, sorry, is one more thought on the top 10 too. What that also allows us to do is it also allows us, selfishly, to hold our clients accountable, right? And so we're always the ones that are held accountable. It says, why is the budget so much more and why are we doing this? When we can go back and say, Jake, that was 10th on your list of 1 through 10. So is how important is that, and who is really driving the budget on that? So we kind of use that as a self-check, and a lot of times our clients are saying, you know what, John, you're right. That was 10th on the list. Thanks for reminding me about that. And so I think that whole thing of getting all your notes together, comparing them, and then prioritizing them in some way. And then if you're working with the right team, they'll want to maybe reprioritize some of them, but then also saying like, okay, well, we're in agreement that this was 10th, so that can come off to kind of be at the budget, in the budget scenario that you want to be in.
That's very true. How many other questions, Stace?
I guess we all do start with a budget realistically, and then you get into the project and what my father always called the might as well. So, you might as well do this, might as well do that. And you do, as you start to see a project coming along, it touches other parts of your thing. So you start with a budget realistically, but what do you suggest that people plus it, in their mind so they don't get upset with the change orders? Is it 10%, would you say, above what you start with? Is it?
I think, Stacey, it depends. I think that's the other reason why we love the top 10. Because what you do on the top 10 is a lot of those, while you're here, we're kind of already on that list, and you kind of know roughly where that is. I think to us, one of the things that we really focus on internally is making sure that the project is within 10% of what we had started at. I think for both of these projects, there was not many things that we had change order driven items.
If it was going to go, I could speak very personally, because it's easy to blow it up. And I really didn't want to blow it up. When I bought my house, the real estate agent I was working, now I'm the real estate agent, but the one I was working at the time said, it's a 3-bedroom house, don't over improve it. Think about the value of your house and I thought it was really solid advice, because you can go crazy, and at the end of the day you go to sell it and it's a 3-bedroom house, maybe a 4-bedroom house. It's easier to sell. And it stuck with me, and I had to make those decisions, and every step of the way, Cutting Edge Homes would, I had a project manager, but I also had Sean. Couldn't get away, but every step of the way, it was this reminder, well, fine, if you can have that, this is what's going to do to your budget. You can do that, but this is what's going to do to your budget. Okay, but what kind of windows do you want? This is what's going to do to your budget. And it was a discussion so that I didn't go over budget. I had some surprises. I think you have to save some surprises. It's an old house. There's some rotted stucco wall. It was not pretty or sexy to have to fix. It was a bummer. Things happen. You start to tear things up a little bit. You have to account for that. But I think that the original plan left us maybe 10 or 15% or something like that. But every step of the way, what are you spending on your hardware? What are you spending on your appliances? What I will credit Sean with doing is his initial allowances, the high-end appliances or whatever you have in mind, were very spot on. So my tiles and my cabinetry, he really set a very good budget, knowing kind of what I wanted to do and what he thought it would cost. Those were not over budget at all. It's just the surprises. So I think you do probably want to keep something. Landscaping is always, I think it's even harder with landscaping.
So the way we approach it, it's really funny, because we always tell people, like, if you have a really specific budget, let's design to that. But as we were saying, sometimes you limit yourself. A really great nugget of a great idea, something you really enjoy, might get skipped out of the design phase. So what we do is we have a conceptual phase where we put all your ideas on paper. Some of ours present a really scary number, but it's just to get the ideas going, and then you start picking and choosing from there. we kind of leave it to you to keep your contingency plan of what you might like to spend extra so that you can plan what's comfortable for you to bite off in the fixed bid, which, you know, we own if we miss something when we're evaluating. And then if you, during the project you want to add something on and it's comfortable, we'll work with you about working that in. Industry standard says 10%, but we don't like to say that because we like you guys to always know what your budget is and always be comfortable with that.
I think my hubby had 10% saved off from it and wouldn't let me touch that. And then it was a matter of, for me, the fixtures were going to be pricey. So knowing that I wanted this really nice hand-painted tile on the backsplash or the back of my kitchen island meant that I needed to go with a more inexpensive tile on the backsplash. So weighing this, how do I keep to the number, honoring both my husband's wishes and Sean's sanity, and still get that design aesthetic that I saw in my head. And so we did. We went with a nice hand painted tile on the backsplash, and then we went. I think it was really inexpensive. The subway tile on the back of the kitchen.
As the cheaper, more economic materials, when installed really well, can look great.
We did it in an interesting pattern that I don't think you see very often. So we took what was inexpensive and we made it lovely, and it just like brought the whole kitchen together. I did not get the fancy kitchen faucet that I wanted because it wasn't in budget and I was trying to keep the numbers right. So it was really a knowing where I wanted the impact to lie and being able to put money towards those things. The kitchen pendant lights were going to be expensive, so that meant going with a more inexpensive light over the breakfast nook.
But you can work together with the given.
Yes.
And I think it's instead of more budget too, like Jamie, I remember, we had the stucco that we weren't expecting. And I know that one of the things that what I would say to look at is, instead of necessarily money, is where we can potentially save. Like there was a scenario where we're going to rip up all the floors in the house. And when some of these changes said, you know what, let's actually these oak floors are really good. Let's bring in our floor guy. Let's see how many sands they have left. And you know what? So working with a partner who you feel, one of a really good question, right, is how many of your projects are going to come in, and when you talk to a couple references, asking them that. So when we have a $20,000 stucco surprise, we already kind of in the back pocket say, you know what, let's not redo the floors everywhere. These floors are really good. Now the floors end up being kind of one of the favorite things in the project. So I think it's just the same thing as if just when you're working with the right team, just because something's more expensive doesn't mean that it's better. And when you're faced with a change order, what Jack said, she has a really old foundation, and we were kind of digging gingerly around it, and we ended up, needing to do additional work there of $5,000 or $10,000. I don't remember exactly what it was. So then what we decided to do was say, hey, if we're going to need to do that anyway, why don't we actually just dig down the basement a little bit further and use it as storage space? So how are you able to collaborate with someone and partner with someone to say, geez, this is going to be a tough conversation. Neither of us were expecting it. But how do we kind of come together in a way that can kind of add value more than is just what's in your checkbook?
And that experience is something that design build's really geared towards, because what I was just hearing is, you have something that you end up spending a little bit more on, the tile thing. You're able to switch gears and find a way to make something else less expensive but still beautiful. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to have multiple conversations with the architect and the builder to find that solution. It's probably one meeting and a day, and you're on a new track and nothing's held up. So that is something I wanted to add there.
Somebody else? Hi, go ahead.
So you talked a little bit about how to get started.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in a unique situation where I have no idea exactly what my vision is. I just know I need a little bit more square footage. I live in a home that was built in 1775, and it's a very narrow and long home. So after you meet the person that you're like, I could definitely work with you, what happens from that point on? Because if you don't have the vision, I don't even know what I could possibly do because of the narrow plot lines.
Yeah, so I think that is, I've said it now, going back to that top 10, is because what a lot of times, so we have some clients that are like Jackie and say, then their top 10 is accompanied with pictures. We have other clients that are like, I just need more square footage. So don't be intimidated by you're not necessarily needing the vision, like that's what you hire an expert for. And so it's more like their top 10 in your scenario would be like, I need more square footage. I need a more functional kitchen. I need a master bath. Like the top 10 can be a much more higher level thing than I want this type of stove in my kitchen, because then what you're doing is then, especially in an old home like that, we're looking at scenarios and saying like, okay, well, where is the best place to add square footage? And, at Jackie's house, which is very common in Wellesley, there are very strict rules on where you can add square footage and how much square footage you can add. So looking at a scenario of kind of where it's actually, our ideal scenario is more like yours. Like, I don't know where, but I want a little bit more square footage, where someone is a little bit more open to that and not knowing exactly where it needs to be. That allows us to kind of design around kind of what makes most sense for what the town is going to allow you to build and what works for the house.
Anybody else have a?
Yeah, this question is for Sean. As a builder, do you have a preferred time, either the design process or the build process, that you like to engage, have your clients, I should say, engage with the landscape design build? Thank you.
Yeah, so for us, I think the ideal scenario for us is that they're having kind of an initial conversation up front of just generally what they want for landscape. And then as construction is starting to tail down, then landscape is starting to tail. Part of it for us is just a bandwidth for some clients of just like, I can't tackle a full landscape project and a full construction project at the same time. The other part of it is just a safety thing. If we're doing roofing and siding, don't necessarily want bobcats and things on that. So for us, our kind of ideal scenario that we've found successful and we found successful with our landscape partners is having a general kind of initial conversation, putting it away until the project is like halfway done, and then being able, so that then you can kind of seamlessly integrate into landscape, whether that's that same year or the following spring or whatever it is. But for us, we don't typically have the clients that have the $3 to $5 million budgets where they're wanting to incorporate them instantaneously at the same time. So that's what we just have found to be.
I agree, Sean. I think it's nice if you are planning on having a landscaping portion as part of your addition or renovation to have some initial conversations so that your egresses and your connections to indoor-outdoor spaces make sense and they harmonize with the architect and landscape designer architect's vision of how the space is going to work, view sheds and things like that. But then you probably want to get more into the meat of the home renovation before you start tackling the specifics of the landscaping, because you might, a lot of times you've probably been there before where you've seen houses where they're too separate, but at the same time you're right, you don't want to be adding more elements to the decision-making process because there's a lot going on.
Just a bandwidth thing.
Yeah, it's a bandwidth thing.
Yeah, and I think as for us, I also think that one of the things that we've tried really consciously to do is partnering with great vendors so that we can kind of stay out of their way. I think sometimes builders and architects try too hard to micromanage every single aspect of it. And I think for us, as the home, when you look at it from a construction perspective, like kind of like as plaster is starting to go on the walls and a lot of your decisions then are made, then that's probably a good time to start transitioning and kind of shifting your bandwidth a little bit more from a landscape perspective, just so that you kind of, generally know what direction you want to go in.
Thank you. Who else has a question? You had a question.
Yeah, I just was wondering if raising the nightmare scenario of trying to live in your home while it's being renovated, and wondering whether you had any comments on that. We have a house that was built around 1895, and I've thought about doing things piecemeal, like the kitchen we did when we first moved in, which was 87, and it needs a lot now, and a bathroom and stuff. But by now, it needs a lot of stuff, but I really don't want to have to remove out of it.
So we lived through ours, all 9 months of it, with a not quite 2-year-old and a not quite 3-year-old. I mean, they were little at the time. What Sean and his team ended up doing was turning our dining room into a makeshift kitchen. So they ran temporary plumbing. They put our washer and dryer in the entryway. So we had the function of the things that you use on a day-by-day process, like we had a dishwasher, we had our clothing, place in the entryway. It wasn't pretty by any stretch, but it was very functional. And then they put a temporary wall lining the whole back of our house that they insulated. It really wasn't that cold, and it wasn't that loud. It was shockingly, the day that they sawed off the back of the house and the excavator grabbed it and pulled it off, I was upstairs putting my son down for a nap, and I glanced out the window and saw a plume of dust, and I said, no, they didn't just knock down our house with me in it and not know that it happened. And I ran outside because I was trying to document it, like photos and capture it, and it had already come down. He had already grabbed the back of the house and taken it down while my son was going down for a nap. So it can be shockingly quiet, and it can be shockingly easy to live through a renovation. We had a really good experience. We had a couple days in the depths of winter where some pipes froze, and my hubby was outside with a hairdryer trying to blow them, thaw them out. But the team, we knew exactly who to call. They knew exactly what to do. They told us exactly where the problem was probably going to be. And there were little blips like that along the way, but nothing horrific that makes you want to,
So is it realistic to try and work on, this area, then this area, then this area, so that you're not going crazy with having stuff be in the way?
Yeah, so I think that what I would typically suggest is having an open and honest conversation with your team on what they think is best. I think that part of it is a propensity to pain. I think Jackie's particular situation was a little bit easier of one, which is also one how you can control the budget a little bit more, where we were able to draw a pretty distinct line that said nothing is happening on this side of the house and everything is happening on this side of the house. So when you're able to do that and you have the right team, we literally studded, insulated, used T111 plywood, and we made it kind of it was painted, I think.
I did, I painted it. I couldn't handle it.
It was, so there's a way to do, there are projects that are more adept to doing that than others. For us, it's probably a 50-50 scenario. We have 50% of our clients move out, 50% of our clients live there. We also have a relationship with, there's so many great colleges around here, so one of the things that we have is we have a relationship with teachers that go on sabbatical, and they can have a situation where you can move into their, they're not looking for crazy rents or anything, they're just looking for someone to kind of, be in their house and make sure the pipes don't freeze. So I think it's just looking at it on a project-by-project basis. There are going to be some things that are probably, it's one of those things that you hate to say, but if you're doing an interior renovation more like Jamie's, there was no way that you could have lived there. And a lot of times what our clients will now say after is it seems daunting because you've lived in the house for 30 years. But on the other hand, it's actually a really good excuse to kind of edit and audit your stuff that you have, and re-realize stuff that you have, but also the donate versus throw away versus keep kind of pile is a good reason to do that. So with paint and floors, I think a lot of time in this industry, a lot of talks that I do, there are a lot of contractors that are afraid because they know what you want them to tell you, that, just live there. And then what happens is you get very frustrated because you say, there's plaster dust all over my couch. Why didn't you guys tell me that? It's because you told me you wanted to live there. And so having a really open and honest conversation of is my project a fit for me to live here or not? Part of it too is cost. If you're going to go and renovate kind of your family room and then renovate your kitchen and then renovate this room, that's going to be more expensive. So a lot of times for our clients, it's, I can get a $4,000 a month rental, and I need it for 6 months, so that's $24,000. Mr. Contractor, what is the price if I piecemeal that? And typically those costs are either pretty similar, or actually it might even be more expensive to do it in a piecemealed process because you have the project manager, you have the dumpster, you have you're going to get an economies of scale of pricing from the electrician and the plumber because they're able to kind of tackle a lot of things at once. So I just think it just goes back to really good communication and just asking. And what I would highly recommend to anyone thinking about a renovation is do not lead whoever you're working with into an answer that you're hoping for them to give you. give them the space to honestly give you an answer, so that then you can then you can hold them accountable. It's like, no, I asked you 3 times, and 3 times you told me I could stay here. And and what you're going to want to do is also process like how well they're listening to you. Like when a client says for us, hey, do you think we can live here? My first question back is, well, how okay are you with dust? Oh my God, I'm allergic to dust. Well, then you can't live. Like it needs to be a very collaborative process. It shouldn't just be, can I live here? Yes. There should be a couple questions that are asked back to see if that's a good fit to be able to do that or not.
Good advice. Who else might? Oh, you have a question back there?
Sorry,
You
I'm
go.
stealing it from you.
We'll get to you next.
So we moved here like a year ago and decided to rent instead of buy, because I'd love to buy an older home that I can renovate. So my question is really more about like what can you do, and what are, like, as a design build company, are you open, like, should I be interviewing design build companies now without even having the home in mind to know who I want to partner with?
Can I answer that? a bit?
We moved from San Francisco, where when we moved there, I couldn't get anyone to even talk to me about doing projects on my house for like 7 months, because everyone was so booked up.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to be able, like, part of our budget is what you're just talking about, like, for us to stay in the rental while the renovation happens.
Sure.
So when we do buy a house, I want to be able to, like, get going
Sure.
as soon as we can.
Yeah.
I guess I'm just curious about, like, what.
Let me
what you
speak
do
to that a
before
little
you
bit,
go.
Sean,
Yeah.
because I kind of had that, because I was moving, I found a house, but we needed to be in a rental because the house needed so much work.
Yeah.
And so it was nice to have a builder to talk to while I was even considering buying the house. The house wasn't, it wasn't my house, we saw it on the first day together. And it was this whole process of having a discussion, actually with Sean, for a couple months, was this really gonna happen, and what would it take to build it? I've actually, brought Sean to clients who I've shown houses to who were considering a renovation. And so Sean was very generous with his time, but was happy to come in and see, and they ended up not purchasing that house because it was too much for what they wanted. They probably could knock the whole house down. They weren't gonna get, at the end of the day, they would spend all the money and not get what they wanted. You were still gonna walk into the staircase, you were never gonna have whatever. So I think it's valuable to go look at houses, and then if you find something you like, before you make that purchase, you bring Sean in and say, is this doable? Because if we buy this house, this is what we would have to spend. This is kind of what we need, whether we have kids or we don't, or we want to have kids, and kind of we need the 2 bathrooms, whatever it is. Can you give me an idea? And I think that's something that, I'll speak to that, but I think something that Sean's very good at doing, because I just had this experience with him not too long ago, walking through with clients who hadn't even bought the house, just to give an idea, a concept. How much money do you have? Do you think you have to spend? I don't think you're going to, he was very honest, I don't think you're going to be able to achieve your goals for that in this space. And they moved on, so.
We work on a lot of, I would say 25% of our projects, our client has not lived in the home. And they are entering into design agreements before they've even closed on the home. And so, because real estate here is expensive, and time is money, and if you have to rent, that's more money that you can, not be doing that. So one of the biggest things that design build does is it compresses the time schedule. So when you're working with a traditional architect, the architect designs the plans, and then you bid it out to 3 contractors, and then you have to inevitably always go back and change the plans and re-edit them and go back and forth. And so that process takes a lot of time. With design build, we're not necessarily telling clients that they're saving any money, they're saving time. And so, yeah, we look at homes all the time. And one of the things that we really pride ourselves on, because I kind of believe in karma, and like we tell clients all the time, like, this house is the right fit for what you want to do. And I think it's kind of an invaluable resource for, like, we have clients who look at us funny and they're like, wait, Sean, like, you're literally telling me, like, this house should, like, don't you want the work? And for us, it's just, early on in my career, we had a client who, wanted our opinion, I gave like a very honest opinion. We never ended up working with them. 3 years later, their boss calls me and is like, "Hey, Sean, you worked with so and so," and I said, "Who?" He said, "Well, you actually didn't work with them, but you just consulted with them." I said, "Oh, okay." So I just think for us, we work in such a small area of towns that having someone who you feel like can give you kind of an honest opinion. And that's the other great thing with design build, is that quickly you're able to be in a scenario where like, wait, so there's a vision, but then also what's this vision going to cost, so that then we can somewhat make an educated bid, on the house. If the house is on the market for 1.5 and you think that there's $800,000 worth of work, then maybe you'll bid 1.2 or 1.3. But we're absolutely happy to kind of have those initial conversations early on, where like, no, you know what, this house just isn't necessarily the right fit for what it's going to take to do it. And some of that stuff, like, is ceiling height. Like, you can't change ceiling height without knocking the house down. Or, there are just some things that it's a really good idea to be able to have, a resource initially that you can kind of help guide through that process, because there are only so many things. That's why a lot of great agents do that, because they only can know so much, without having some help from someone else.
You want to ask? Yeah, right.
So I had a two-part question. Part of it was
Only get one.
partially just answered. There are three parts of the project, right? The creative design portion of it, the budget, and schedule. So touching a little bit more on schedule, is it better from a schedule standpoint to work with a design build? With a design build company, does that shorten the time frame? What does that look like? And you had mentioned 8 to 9 month project. Like, is that start to finish? Is that design to completion? What does that look like on any given project?
Yeah, I think so. For us, is one of the things that we like to do on non-addition projects, we like to have an internal target that 1 year from the initial conversation, the project is done. When you get into additions, it's probably more like 1.5 years is our target, just because typically it can take 3 or 4 months to permit some of these things. And again, I just think that the upfront pre-construction work is so much more streamlined in a design build process, because for us, on both of these projects, I mean, we were bidding the plans off of like 2 pages of plan. We didn't need a 50-page construction set that you had paid $100,000 for to be able to bid the plans, because we knew roughly where we wanted structural support and what the client's vision was. And so we're able to kind of compress that time frame down than what you would have with a normal architecture relationship. And again, it's not, this isn't perfect for every project. I mean, there's a couple, there's that home right near Jamie's that I love that, is this, architect that's extremely well renowned. And, so if you have a year to design something and you have, $200,000 or $300,000 to design it, and you have a $1,000 a square foot budget to build it, then that is probably a better scenario. If you have, a scenario where you're in a kind of normal scenario, then that may not be the best fit for you.
That's a really good point. Some people want to go and knock the house down, build a whole house. Maybe you do want a separate architect and it's a whole different project. I think those of you that are here are speaking more about, what do I do with the home I have now, or what do I do with the home I want to get into? And how do you want to be happy. I would say to my clients, you want to be happy when you come home. You want to feel good about where you go to sleep. I have some of you guys, it's not an emotional decision. This is business, it's finance. It is an emotional decision, because everybody wants to feel they come home at the end of the day, or they wake up in the morning. You want to feel good about where they are. You want to feel good about where you live. You want to have your family there, or your grandkids, or your little kids, or your family come visit from California. And you want a pretty space. And, I think what the folks here are really good at doing is helping you, once you get into that space, helping you really create the vision. And you don't have to be the one to come up with the ideas, but it is a partnership. It's a long-lasting relationship. And I think what Sean is talking about, you can take any existing space and make it better, make it something that you really are happy to wake up in.
I think I think there was just two other things too on that, as I think that when interviewing either design build or interviewing architects, I think one of the best questions to ask is, what is the percentage of projects that you design that actually get built? And I think that is a very powerful question that you're going to want to wait and see the answer for. For us, it's in the 90%. Look, things happen and projects don't go well, and meaning from a design process. But the industry standard is probably more like 50% from an architecture perspective. So asking that question, how many projects that you design actually get built, is a very important one. And then I think the other one that came to mind is also in the keys to a successful renovation, be really clear about what is excluded in your agreement. So a lot of times people want to concentrate on what's included, right? But you're not experts, right? So asking your contractor or what is excluded from this, and so that what you can kind of do is back into that a little bit and say, well, if that's not in the exclusion list, then that means that it's included, and you can kind of have that conversation. And again, it kind of protects both of you when you're having a conversation of like, no, landscaping is not included in this agreement. You need to have another, oh, so you mean, Sean, like nothing, like the yard, like you're going to leave it a mud pit? Like, yes. Okay, so I don't want a mud pit. Okay, great. Well, then, then we need to factor in $10,000 to have Colin's team come in and do a baseline, just not having a mud pit scenario, right? But like, I would just be, I think it's very important. It's the same with landscape too. What is the percentage of projects that you design that actually get built? Yep. And just being, when you get further down that process, what are the exclusions that are not included in this? Because I think some of the things that happen, especially in design build, is so many things get talked about in the process. But then when it actually comes time to put pen to paper to do the budget, some of those things, oh wait, was that included? Was that not included? Wait, I forget now. So having a really kind of clear list of things that are not included in that agreement, so that everyone is on the same page and can kind of move forward, I think is super helpful.
You're going to be updated on budget as you go too, so that you can, edit or add, as you go along, which you guys do a great job of. I think maybe we should take one more question, and then we're going to be happy to hang around and talk. And go ahead. Maybe two more questions.
Can you give us a range of dollar per square foot cost for your design build process?
That's always the $1 million question. I think for us, but
not $1 million a square foot.
Yeah. I think for us is we really want to target a particular market that we call kind of the BMW level finish. Like we're not doing a Ferrari level, and we're not wanting to do the Toyota Camry size. So I think in general, we're liking to kind of be in between the $300 and $600 a square foot range. Now, and there are plenty of people out there that are going to be in the $200 square foot range, and there are plenty of people out there that'll be in the $1,000 square foot range. So we like to kind of, and again, one of the things that what troubles people when they go on Google and Google what should the cost of my square footage be. One of the biggest things that we're facing as a challenge now is, on a 3,000 square foot house, you still have a kitchen, you still have a staircase, you still have 3 bathrooms. You still have a lot of the same things that you have in a 5,000 square foot house. It's just that the rooms are bigger. So when you get smaller down in square footage of scope, that price is going to creep up. When you get up higher into the square footage of scope, then that's where that price can come down a little bit, because you're getting some economies of scale and you're getting some efficiencies. But again, I think that for us, kind of differently, what we were talking about before of like, we like just giving clients kind of a very general range, like quickly. I mean, our process typically is we'll go out, and in a 1-hour meeting, we're coming back to you and we're giving you a very general ballpark that is, hey, Jay, like that project is between, $500,000 and $700,000. Well, gee, Sean, that's a big swing. Yes, it is, but at least we just kind of have some general sense of kind of what it's looking at. I would highly suggest that method than the back of the envelope. So I want to do 1,000 square foot addition. So $300 a square foot is $300. So Sean, you're telling me we can do this for $300,000? It's not always that as cut and dry as that would be.
We get one more.
I'm kind of like not in this group, I'm more like the $25 a square foot. They do most of the work myself.
Sure.
And one of the problems I have, though, I have an old house, and I put in, one of those, high-efficiency boilers in a few years ago.
Mhm.
It's an old Victorian house, and the old boilers gave out a lot of heat. These new ones, they get chugging, and they still, and it's an old house, so it needs to be super insulated from one
Sure.
to the other. So what I find, though, is that I really can't find information that's easy to understand about insulating and efficiency and trying to add your own kind of like retrofitting this to your house. I mean, I look on building science and they have these different layers of building, you know, to prevent mold growth and whatever. So it's very complicated for someone like me who even if you ask like contractors, even they don't even know sometimes how to handle like ventilation in the attic. They look at, they give me suggestions that are totally contrary to what, you know, I read online, you know. I know it's a really complicated question, but is there a specialist who just could help someone like myself with just ventilation and insulation that
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, look, insulating an old Victorian without doing a major renovation is a difficult project.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times, too, the technology is advancing so quickly that a lot of old school contractors can't even necessarily keep up with how quick, you know, spray foam and open versus closed, and how do we waterproof it properly, and how do you ventilate it properly. But there are engineers that are out there that can kind of help from that perspective, and I'm happy after to kind of give you a contact that could kind of help with that.
Great, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
So we wanted to leave a little time to mingle, and we'll be here, and we want to thank you all so much for coming, and hopefully we've helped a little bit. Looking at your watch because I had my timing, and your watch I could see.